All right, my AirPods Pro 3 have arrived. I've had a chance to test them out, to play with the hearing aid mode. And in this video, we're going to go into all of the features that AirPods Pro 3 has to offer for folks with hearing loss, or even folks who are looking to protect their hearing. I'll compare the new AirPods Pro 3 to the older AirPods Pro 2. I'll also compare this hearing aid to some of the leading over-the-counter hearing aids on the market, and where I think this fits in the overall hearing health landscape. If we haven't yet met, my name is Blake Cadwell. I'm the co-founder at Soundly.com. We're one of the leading destinations for hearing health research and shopping online. I'm also a hearing aid wearer, and I've spent time in over 50 different hearing aids over the last year, including both the AirPods Pro 3 and the previous generation AirPods Pro 2. If you like what you see in this video, I'd appreciate it if you give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Helps us reach more people. With that, let's dig in. All right, let's start out with some basics. In this video, we're focused exclusively on AirPods Pro. Now, Apple has several different types of AirPods available, but the hearing health features are primarily found in the older AirPods Pro 2 and the newer AirPods Pro 3. So in this video, we're going to focus specifically on those models. Now, it's likely that you've seen AirPods Pro before or even have a pair, but they essentially sit in this magnetized case. They have a little ear tip on them that fully seals off your ear. They offer excellent noise cancellation, so active noise cancellation if you're in a loud environment streaming music. And they also offer some interesting hearing health features, which will be the main focus of this video. Now, before we dig in, let me just give you a little bit of background on how Apple ended up building a hearing aid into their AirPods Pro 2. There are a few different things it's important to understand as you're really trying to wrap your head around this category. The first is on the Apple side. So when they first brought out an active noise canceling device in the AirPods Pro, they realized that they would need some way for folks to hear pass-through sound. So if they were walking on a street, for example, they wanted folks to be able to hear a car driving by or just get some sense of what was around them. So they designed this process called transparency mode. You would simply pinch the armband of your AirPods and it would kick in sound brought into your ears from around you. So this transparency mode became a standard across different headphone makers and has continued to be a standard within the Apple devices. Now, around the same time, Apple started to play with frequency shaping for music listening. So when you actually put your device in your ears and you're streaming music or a podcast, Apple figured, hey, let's customize that sound to your particular tastes and maybe even your particular hearing needs. So they built in some customizations that essentially let you design the way you hear music and streaming into your ears. The hearing aid mode in Apple's devices came from a combination of these two things. So they essentially took transparency mode, which is bringing in outside world sound, and frequency shaping, now through an onboard hearing test, and they've effectively now created a device that you can wear in your ears. It opens up your field of sound and it can amplify sound to match your particular hearing loss. This is, in effect, an over-the-counter hearing aid. In fact, in 2024, Apple announced that the FDA had designated its hearing aid software as the first of its kind OTC FDA-approved hearing aid software. So that was in the old Apple AirPods Pro 2. Now, a year later, we have updated hardware and the hearing aid feature very much still exists in these devices. So later in the video, I'll show you the full setup process and how the hearing test works, how the customization work. But first, let's just talk about some of the differences between the AirPods Pro 3 and the AirPods Pro 2. Maybe you already have a pair of AirPods Pro 2 and you're trying to decide if you should upgrade. For those with hearing loss, there are a few interesting updates to these devices. The first is that they've made some minor changes to how the ear tips and the actual design of the earbud work. I find them a bit more comfortable than the older generation. If you've worn AirPods Pro before, you know that it simply plugs up your ear and sometimes can feel uncomfortable after maybe an hour or two of wear. I find these are still somewhat uncomfortable after a long period of wear, but they're more comfortable than previous generations. So that's meaningful. The second major upgrade for those who are trying to use Apple's AirPods as a hearing aid is that they've improved the battery life. And this is a big one. The old battery life was maybe 4 or 5 hours. The new battery life can go up to 10 hours. So you're now talking about a device that can nearly last you for a whole day. You could wear this through a full day of travel, still be getting amplification, streaming music, going in and out of listening to your devices or listening to the world around you, and still have some battery life left over. Of course, the charger itself carries a nice charge. So if you simply drop your device inside the charger, charged up for 15 minutes, you'll get quite a bit more power as well. So this is a really nice improvement between AirPods Pro 3 and AirPods Pro 2. The other noteworthy change for those with hearing loss who are accessing the hearing aid feature is that these devices now have the ability to automatically go into conversation boost mode. When we get into the app, I'll show you there's a toggle you can turn on that turns on conversation boost. And in the old generation of devices, you actually had to manually turn that on to turn on conversation boost. The new devices are kicking into that mode when you're in a loud environment. So they're basically sensing the world around you and making some automatic changes. That's, again, really nice for folks who are trying to use these as hearing aids in a louder environment or maybe changing environments and they want the devices to change with them. So these are nice improvements. But it's worth noting that the core functionality, the hearing test, the basic features, the way these devices work is just like the AirPods Pro 2. So I was watching closely last month as the keynote rolled out to see if there would be any new hearing health specific features or functions. And the reality is no, it's mostly just minor improvements to the battery life and the automated conversational awareness. Now, Apple would also tell you that they've upgraded their chip, which increases their ability to manage sudden sounds and ultimately manage the world around you. But as I've worn the two devices side by side, I'm not really hearing a big difference in how they actually sound compared to one another. So that leads me to what might be your next question, which is how do these actually sound? As I'm wearing them in real world settings where people are talking to me or maybe multiple people are talking at the same time, do they actually manage background noise? Do they actually help me hear better in those environments? The simple answer is yes. These are pretty good entry-level over-the-counter hearing aids that can support me in a fairly dynamic conversational environment. As I've been in conversations with several people at the same time, I've noticed they're doing a nice job switching between folks. I've noticed that they're isolating conversation a little bit further away from me when I'm looking in that direction, which is really nice. And just like I noticed with the AirPods Pro 2, the sound can be a little bit muddy or muddier than what I expect with hearing aids, but in general, I do get a boost. And what I would say is that if you compare AirPods Pro 3 to some of the lower cost over-the-counter devices that sit inside the ear, think Atom Pro, which has an earbud style form factor, but is built by a separate company, the sound quality in AirPods Pro 3 is much, much better. Now, if you look at a slightly higher quality product like Sony CRE-C20 or Sennheiser All Day Clear, which sits behind the ear, the sound quality within Apple's AirPods is not quite that sophisticated. I'm not getting the same level of clarity, and I'm certainly not getting the same level of open sound into my ears. One of the reasons for that is that I am entirely plugging up my ears. So all of the sound that I'm hearing is coming through the recreated software that Apple has on board these devices. In some ways, that's just fine, but it ultimately means I have just a little bit less of a natural listening experience. If you compare that to something like the Sennheiser All Day Clear, which has this open ear tip and sits behind the ear, I'm getting a mix of natural sound and amplified sound, which ultimately just typically helps me understand better and feel more comfortable for long stretches of hearing aid wear. One thing I really appreciate about Apple's devices, both their last generation and this generation, is that you do get quite a few controls within the app experience. You can turn up or down the ambient sound, meaning the sound of fans or traffic or just the sound of the world around you. You can turn on the conversation boost, as we talked about. You can alter the volume quite a bit. One thing that I've noticed is I actually like to turn the volume up quite a bit more than what it will naturally set it to. This is not necessarily a surprise because I think what Apple realizes is that folks will turn on the hearing aid mode and maybe they have no experience wearing a hearing aid, so the world will sound a lot louder than what they're expecting. In my case, I like turning it up almost to its max to get the true volume and clarity that I'm looking for. One drawback is when I turn the volume up quite a bit, I am getting wind noise. So for example, if I'm walking quickly, I'll hear the wind kind of quietly whistling past the armband here. Certainly if I'm outside and the wind is moving around, it starts to become pretty challenging. So wind noise is one thing that I've been a little bit disappointed by in both the Apple AirPods Pro 2 and this newer generation, Apple AirPods Pro 3. So those are some of my notes on sound quality. These devices will absolutely support you, especially if you're in a transitional moment, like during travel, or maybe you're listening to something, you want to stop and have a quick conversation. These are fantastic in those types of situations. For long-time hearing aid wear, they probably don't quite live up to a specialized device, maybe not surprisingly. Okay, so this brings us to a really important topic to touch on for anyone who's considering Apple AirPods Pro 3 versus other hearing aids on the market, and that is form factor. So hearing aids are typically built with a form factor that, one, lets in outside world sound, as I mentioned, And two, fits really comfortably in the ear canal for 10 or 12 hours of wear. So if you look at an alternative product like the Sony CRE-C20, one, you'll see this product is just a lot smaller. If I pull my AirPod Pro out of my ear, you can see these devices are not even really that similar in size. And then when I put the Sony CRE-C20 into my ear, if I were to turn to the side, you really wouldn't even be able to see that the device is inside of my ear. Now, obviously, if you compare that to Apple's AirPods Pro 3, it looks like I'm wearing an earbud, which is just fine, but that means that in a social setting, if you're wearing these as hearing aids, you may have to tell someone that you're not streaming a game or streaming music or on a phone call, but you're actually with them, you're listening to them, and you're using your Apple devices as a hearing aid. Now, maybe this will become more normal as more folks use these devices as hearing aids, but today I find that if I'm going into a social setting, I end up wanting something that has more of a purpose-built form factor, like Sony, or I often will wear these behind the ear hearing aids, which can be even more comfortable in the ear and tend to be very discreet and out of the way. Most people will never know that I'm wearing them. Okay, so before I dive into the app and show you how the full setup works, I'll walk you through the test and all the controls, how you can update these devices to match your needs. Where do I think these fit in the overall hearing health landscape? First of all, I would say I'm thrilled that Apple is putting this type of technology into their consumer devices. These products are just $250, which means that they're one of the most affordable hearing aids on the market. And that is incredible news for access and accessibility. A lot of folks already have this product. They can simply turn it into a hearing aid. Now, at the same time, I would say that Apple AirPods Pro 3 are not going to replace hearing aids for most people who have hearing loss. In most cases, folks are going to find that this is a product they want in their toolkit. The way I use it is that I use my Apple AirPods Pro 3 almost every single day to stream calls, stream music. I love that the music and calls are customized to my particular hearing loss. I love that if I need to go into transparency mode or the hearing aid mode, I can have a full conversation while I'm wearing these earbuds in my ears. But later today, I'm meeting some colleagues for coffee, and I'll absolutely wear something that is purpose-built as a hearing aid in that context. Both because I don't want to have to explain that I'm actually listening to them and that I'm present in the conversation, and because I find hearing aids a bit more effective in background noise and definitely more comfortable for long time wear. So for many folks who can afford it, a great pair of AirPods and a hearing aid are the perfect match in your overall hearing health toolkit. All right, with that, let's dig into the app. I'll show you exactly how these AirPods Pro 3 get set up, show you the test, and how you can customize these to your particular hearing needs. All right, so let's walk through the Apple AirPods Pro 3 setup and the ways that you can actually customize your particular devices for your hearing loss. So to start, you'll want to just simply pair your devices. You can typically hold the case next to your phone. It'll kick open a little profile window here and you just tap connect. I've already done that. So now I'm in my settings section, and at the top of the settings, I see my Blake's AirPods Pro 3. So I'll tap into that. And this is really my control panel for all the things that I might want to do with my AirPods Pro. The first thing I want to take a look at is the hearing assistance section. So if you've already gone through your hearing test in the past, you can simply tap on this, update hearing results, and you could pick from any one of the tests that you've taken in the past. In my case, I simply tapped my latest test, I set up my hearing aid, and I clicked get started, and I hear the hearing aid itself kick in. Now, it's worth noting that when you get here, you will need to toggle on the hearing aid feature, which you'll hear increase the transparency in your devices, in your ears. Now, another part of the app experience that's really important is this adjustments section. So just as a refresher, you're here, you go into hearing assistance, and you go to adjustments. Now, inside the adjustments section, you can do a lot of interesting things. So one, you can simply turn up the volume or turn it down. I can hear that impacting the volume inside of my devices right now. You could change the right and left balance, which will be automatically set based on your hearing test. But if you want more volume on one side or the other for some reason, you could do that. You can also adjust the treble and bass. If you go to brighter, it's going to sound crisper. I can feel a little bit more consonants, S's and T's coming through. Then if you go down here, it sounds rounder, bassier. I typically like to keep this towards the middle. Now, the next feature is something I have played with quite a bit, and that is the ambient noise reduction. So if I turn this way up, what it's going to do is it's going to make the world around me sound quieter. Not particularly the speech around me, but things like the air conditioning or the traffic around me. So I've often found that I'm liking this at somewhere about halfway. I don't love a ton of ambient noise, but I also don't want it to be totally silent when someone's not speaking. So this midpoint has worked really well for me. It is worth noting that it starts on the lowest end. So you'll need to come in and play with this if you do want some more ambient noise reduction. Here's conversation boost. We talked about how this kicks in automatically when you're in loud environments, but if you want it on all the time, simply toggle there. And then you can play with the sound of your own voice. So if you're distracted by the sound of how loud your voice is, you might want to turn your own voice amplification down. As I do that, I can actually hear it turning down the sound of my voice. So those are some of the adjustments that you can make. Now, the other important note here is that you can take a hearing test. So if you're someone who has not taken a hearing test or you want to refresh your hearing test, there are two ways that you can do this. The first is that you can tap into hearing assistance and say update test results. Here you can tap scan with camera. You can actually hold your hearing test that maybe you got at a local clinic. Below the camera, it will scan that in, or you can add in your test manually, either from a photo, again, from a test maybe that you took locally, or maybe one that you took on soundly.com, or you can enter your results manually. So this means you'll have to read through your test, and you'll actually enter in all the different data points of that test. It's probably the hardest way to do it, something you could do if you needed to. Now, additionally, if you don't want to go through any of these steps, you can simply tap take hearing test, and this will walk you through a multi-step hearing test where you'll hear beeps in your right and your left ear, and that will be used to automatically generate your audiogram. So this is actually my favorite way to go about this process. I find the hearing test is really good and easy to use and simply comes through your devices themselves. So that's most of what's here as it relates to hearing health. Now, just for fun, if you ever want to get back to the adjustments section quickly, you can actually triple tap on this button here. So if I triple tap, going to pop open a profile that'll actually give me my hearing aid settings. So I can turn my amplification down, my right-left balance, my tone, my ambient noise reduction, my own voice volume, and conversation boost. You can also tap it into live listen, which will effectively turn your phone into a microphone, so you're hearing sounds that's actually going into your devices. If you don't tap that, you'll only hear sound that go through your AirPods themselves. That's actually my recommendation. I find live listen to be pretty overwhelming unless there's a very specific reason to use it. So that's an overview of the app, control, and setup process. All right, that's it. These are the Apple AirPods Pro 3. We've focused specifically on the hearing health features. If you've made it to this point in the video and you still have questions about hearing aids or hearing health, head over to soundly.com. We have a free hearing test you can take in about 5 minutes to assess your hearing level. You can also get in touch with our team and we can help you think through the pros and cons of different devices and care channels available on the market. We appreciate your time and good luck with your research.